Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko iriti Mitchell taku ingo. Greetings, greetings, greetings to you all. On behalf of the New Zealand Society of Scotland and in conjunction with the Royal British Legion Scotland, Arbroath branch, we'd like to welcome you here today and to thank you all for coming along on this beautiful morning. And at this stage, I would also like to pay our respects to Keith Baldry, who was a very, very hard worker with the Legion and is Secretary for the Royal British Legion Scotland Arbroath. We asked, Keith passed away last year, and we asked Keith to give us a good day today. And I think he's done what we've asked him to do, but we'd like to pay respects for all the help that he gave us, and would like to thank you. Thank you all very much. So at this stage, we'd like to say welcome to you all. Thank you.
Before we move on, just a small point. If at any stage you feel you need to go, there's first aid at the rear with water, so please just make your way there, don't worry about that. The main address this year is by the Lord Lieutenant of Angus, which is Georgiana Osborne.
Provost, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. 102 years ago, on the 25th of April, as part of a much larger British and French amphibious force, the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, better known as the ANZACs, landed on the Gallipoli Peninsula in the Dardanelles, Turkey. The resulting appalling loss of life at Gallipoli shocked the citizens of the two young countries. And so, each year, since the end of World War I, on the 25th of April, or on the nearest Sunday, Australians and New Zealanders pause to remember all their countrymen and women who have given their lives in war and those who survived. We know it as Anzac Day. All of us here today, 102 years on, are connected to the First World War, either through our own family history, the heritage of our local communities, or because of its long-term impact on society and the world we live in today. From 2014 to 2018, across the world, nations, communities and individuals of all ages have been coming together to mark, commemorate and remember the lives of those who lived, fought and died in the First World War. 2 weeks ago, I attended with my husband the Scottish commemorative service for the Battle of Arbroath in the Scottish National War Memorial at Edinburgh Castle. 44 Scottish battalions took part in that engagement, and an estimated 18,000 Scots were killed. Indeed, the Battle of Arras in France represents one of the darkest moments for Scotland in World War I. And if this is so for Scotland, then the Battle of Passchendaele in Belgium, whose centenary we also commemorate this year, represents the darkest hour for New Zealand. In a period of just over 2 hours, 800 New Zealanders were killed and nearly 2,000 wounded as they were trapped in the mud and wire before the German machine guns. This bloody massacre represented the first time during the Western Front battles that the New Zealand Division was unable to achieve its objective, and remains the blackest day in New Zealand history. On a more positive note, many of the engineers who turned the old quarries beneath Arras into a network of offensive tunnels were Kiwis, and their efforts enabled the assault battalions to get to their jumping-off points without being seen by the Germans, thereby achieving complete surprise. For children today in New Zealand and Australia, many thousands of miles away, it must be hard to really understand the horrors of the two world wars. Yet children are, of course, taught about the Anzacs, and Iriti Mitchell, our president of the New Zealand Society of Scotland, recently received a letter containing the thoughts of some of the children from Arbroath Primary School in Gisborne, her hometown. Louis wrote, Australia-New Zealand Army Corps are the ones who sailed to Gallipoli to fight off the Turks. Anzac Day reminds me of when the troops landed in Gallipoli on a cliffed beach. It reminds me of my great-granddad, who survived the war and came back. Dad still has his medals. Jonah wrote, Anzac means to me soldiers who fought for us to give us freedom to live in peace. It's a time to remember those who fought in World Wars I and II. Later in this morning's service, Julia and Alexander Bond, grandchildren of the late David Bond, who organised the Anzac service for many years, will lay remembrance crosses inscribed with the thoughts of the Arbroath school children at the graves of the 4 New Zealand airmen buried here in Arbroath Cemetery. All 4 were World War II pilots with the Fleet Air Arm, based just a mile away at Condor. All 4 were aged between only 22 and 24 years of age, and all 4 died as a result of flying accidents. More than 1,000 New Zealanders joined the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy and could be found on every aircraft in every theatre of war, from the Battle of the Atlantic to the final attack on the Japanese mainland. Service with the Fleet Air Arm was highly dangerous, and in Scotland, where much of the training took place, 108 New Zealanders were killed, just training or on local manoeuvres. New Zealand and Australian pilots played a leading role throughout World War II. They came to Britain as part of the Commonwealth Force and were to be found in almost every squadron of the RAF. Indeed, the first British flying ace of the war was Cobber Kane, a Kiwi. 4 New Zealanders commanded fighter squadrons during the Battle of Britain, and 95 fought as fighter pilots. The bravery and professionalism of these pilots is legendary, and the casualties, alas, were desperately high. My mother set sail from New Zealand on the 13th of January 1942 to marry my father, who spent 5 years of the war in London. She sailed on the Rumataka, which had become known as the Lucky Ship, carrying troops to Britain all through the war. The ship was certainly unescorted on my mother's voyage, and on board were 200 troops from the Navy, Air Force and Fleet Air Arm, and 11 civilians. They were 6 weeks at sea and eventually sailed safely up the Clyde at the end of February, having crossed the Atlantic at the height of German U-boat activity. Needless to say, my mother made many friends in those 6 weeks and was devastated to learn of the deaths of several of the pilots within only weeks of arriving in Britain. I remember as a small child going with my family in the 1950s to Anzac Day remembrance services at the Cenotaph in Wellington. At that time, the memories for the returned servicemen and women were obviously very fresh. Today, as the last of the Second World War veterans gradually pass away, Anzac Day continues to enjoy a special reverence in both Australia and New Zealand, and every year many thousands of Australians and New Zealanders make an annual pilgrimage to the Anzac Day dawn service at Gallipoli. As well as a day of remembrance, it has come to celebrate nationhood and values that many feel distinctive and admirable about their country: mateship, unity, courage, self-sacrifice and loyalty. The identity of Anzac Day may well change with successive generations, but however it may change, we must never forget the ultimate sacrifice that so many brave young men, like the 4 New Zealand pilots buried here at Arbroath, made on our behalf. We will remember them.